Hi, I'm Odalus. The day his mother slid a prenup across the table, she smiled and said, "Just making sure you leave with nothing." And he, my fiancé, just sat there, silent. They thought I was desperate, disposable, a placeholder until the real legacy arrived. But they had no idea. I came from silence, but I didn't stay there. When I inherited $29 million, their faces told me everything. You ever wonder what happens when the woman they tried to erase becomes the one rewriting the story? Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from right now? And have you ever been told to know your place just before you turned the table? It was a Wednesday afternoon when the envelope arrived, thick, cream-colored, the kind of stationery you don't just send for dinner. The return address in gold foil read, Blaine Hill. No first names, no hint of warmth. Just their surname, like it carried the weight of old money and older judgment. I stared at it on the kitchen counter for a long while, sipping lukewarm coffee and listening to the hum of my old ceiling fan in San Antonio. I already knew what it was, an invitation. When I finally opened it, the script read like a wedding proclamation from the last century. You are cordially invited to an evening of formal celebration at the Blaine estate to honor the union of our son, Thatcher Blaine, and Miss Odalus Fay. It didn't say my engagement. It said our sons. The difference didn't escape me. Thatcher called an hour later, just as I was stepping out of a client call. His voice was cheerful, a little too rehearsed. "Did you get the invite, babe?" "Got it," I said, still holding the card. "Very royal of them." He laughed nervously. "It's tradition. Just one night. My parents want to make a good impression." I didn't say it, but I'd already been around them enough to know the Blaine family didn't make impressions, they made decisions. The following evening, spring rain left a damp sheen on the driveway as I stepped out of the car. The Blaine estate looked like something out of a luxury real estate catalog. Spotless hedges, a driveway wide enough for motorcades, and too much glass to feel like home. More like a showroom, cold, controlled. A valet took my keys without a word. At the door, I was greeted by a woman in navy silk who smelled of roses and rubbed me the wrong way instantly. "Miss Fay," she said, barely glancing at me, "this way." Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, chilled air, family portraits too large to ignore. One of Thatcher as a child sat above the fireplace. Bow tie, golden curls, already looking like he was told he mattered more than anyone else in the room. Dinner was held in the sunken dining hall, some architectural choice meant to make everyone feel small. And I did, even in heels. Thatcher stood as I entered, a brief smile flashing across his face. He didn't move to greet me, just gestured toward the chair next to his, like I was a guest he didn't quite know what to do with. I sat. Tried to smile. Reginald Blaine nodded politely. Isolde, his wife, my would-be mother-in-law, looked me over like I was an item under auction lighting. "Odalus," she purred. "Welcome. We're so happy you could join us." I wanted to believe her. I really did. The conversation stayed on their terms. Investments, legacy donations, golf courses I'd never heard of. I tried to interject once, mentioning a community clinic my firm had helped restructure. Isolde blinked slowly. "How quaint," she murmured, lifting her wineglass. Thatcher was unusually quiet, like a man trying not to breathe too loudly in his own house. Every time our eyes met, he gave me that apologetic half-smile, as if that counted for something. Dessert was lemon tarts, sweet, tart, and sharp, just like her. Then Isolde stood. "I hope you all enjoyed the meal," she said, tapping her glass gently. "But before we raise a toast to family, we have one small tradition." I should have known something was coming. The room fell into that anticipatory hush people get when they're in on a secret. She lifted a black velvet envelope from the sideboard and placed it in front of me. "We just ask that our new family members acknowledge a small formality," she said, lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I opened it slowly. A prenuptial agreement. 6 pages. Printed on thick legal stock, all assets remain separate. No claims in the event of divorce, no stake in family trust, no inheritance, nothing. Thatcher didn't say a word, didn't reach for my hand, didn't shake his head, just sat still, jaw tight. I was still processing when he slid something small toward me, a gold pen, elegant, engraved. Thatcher and odorless, always. He had given it to me when I walked in. Just a little something, he'd said, voice warm, to mark the next chapter. I'd thought it was romantic. Now it sat beside a legal document that stripped me of any safety if things went south, and that same pen was expected to sign me into silence. I looked at him again. Still, nothing, not even a whisper of protest. Isolde leaned in slightly. "It's just a precaution, dear," she said, "in case things don't work out. We want to make sure you leave with nothing you didn't come with." That last sentence hit like a slap. Dressed in silk and sugar, but it still stung. I sat there a long moment, letting the silence bloom around me. The room waited. A few of them smirked. One of Thatcher's cousins sipped his brandy with a knowing look. Finally, I picked up the pen, turned it in my hand, then placed it gently back in its box. "I'm not sure what I walked into tonight," I said evenly, "but it doesn't feel like a welcome." I stood, no drama, no yelling, just quiet certainty. As I stepped back, I caught Isolde's expression, calm, almost satisfied. She looked straight into my eyes and smiled, like she had won. I didn't slam the door behind me, even though everything inside me begged for a loud ending. I simply walked out of that house, heels clicking against marble floors that never felt like they'd welcome dirt, or people like me. By the time I reached my car, the clouds had split open. A slow, steady drizzle painted streaks across the windshield. I sat there for a moment, engine off, hand still clutching the velvet box with that golden pen inside. It weighed more than it should have, not in ounces, but in everything it now meant. I drove slowly, like my mind needed the road to stretch. Rain traced the edges of the glass. The wipers ticked back and forth with a steady rhythm, but the silence inside the car was louder. I could still hear the way Isolde had said, "So you leave with nothing you didn't come with." Like I was some wandering guest they were politely escorting off their ship before it set sail. What gnawed at me wasn't just her voice, it was Thatcher's absence in that moment. The man who once pressed my hand under the table when he thought I was nervous during client meetings. He'd looked straight ahead tonight, as if my discomfort was part of the decor. The neighborhood lights blurred as I turned onto my street. The Blaine estate faded behind me, but it didn't feel like I'd left. That house had followed me, clung to my coat, crawled into the spaces between my thoughts. When I pulled into my driveway, I left the engine running a moment longer. There was a calmness in the rain that made me hesitate, like maybe if I sat still enough, the world would click back into place. It didn't. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and dropped my clutch on the kitchen counter. The house smelled like lavender and old books. Familiar, mine. I turned the lights on low, took a glass from the cabinet, and poured water I didn't drink. My phone buzzed. I didn't even have to check the screen. I knew it was him. I let it go. 3 rings, 4, then quiet. 10 minutes passed, maybe 12. Then came the knock. I stayed still. Another knock, firmer this time. I crossed the living room, paused with my hand on the handle, and opened it. Thatcher stood there soaked through. No umbrella. His shirt stuck to him, collar curled, hair a mess. He looked small. Not like the man who once held me in silence when I got bad news. He looked like someone who'd let silence do his talking for him, and now regretted it. "I didn't know she was going to spring it on you like that," he said, his voice low. I didn't step aside. I didn't ask him in. It was supposed to be a formality, something legal. I told her not to do it like that. She didn't listen. I leaned my shoulder against the doorframe. "But you did nothing." He swallowed. Rain dripped from his eyelashes. I froze. I didn't want to embarrass anyone. I held his gaze. "You didn't want to embarrass your mother." He blinked. She's always been a lot." I exhaled through my nose. "That's not the problem. The problem is when you aren't." "I'm not her," he said quickly. Odalys, come on. You know me. No, I said calmly. Tonight made me wonder if I ever really did. His mouth opened like he had more to say, but no words came. I didn't invite him to try harder. I closed the door gently. The latch clicked. Only then did my legs start to tremble. I walked back to the kitchen, flicked on the overhead light, and stared at the pen on the counter. It glinted against the granite. Thatcher and Odalys. Always. Always what? I slid down against the cabinets, glass still in my hand, knees drawn to my chest. The house around me was quiet, but inside, the noise was deafening. That kind of hurt, the one where someone doesn't choose you loudly, settles deep. I'd rather he screamed. At least then I'd know where he stood. I didn't cry right away. I tried to rationalize it. Tell myself this is how wealthy families operate, that legal papers are part of their love language, that it wasn't personal. But it was, because silence is personal. Silence says, I saw you drowning, and I watched. Somewhere around midnight I stood, poured the water down the drain, picked up my phone, scrolled past his name, past the missed calls. I tapped on Malis Trant. She picked up on the second ring. You didn't sign it, did you? She asked before I said a word. No, I whispered. Then my voice cracked. But I don't know what I'm engaged to anymore. She was quiet, not the silence that hurts, but the kind that listens. You're not crazy, she finally said. This wasn't about love. It was about control, a test, one you didn't even know you were taking. I sat back on the couch and closed my eyes. Malis kept going. Listen to me, I've seen families like theirs chew people up because they think money makes them gods, but money doesn't rewrite decency. I stared at the pen again. I thought he was different. Then maybe it's time you start asking what they're engaged to, she said. Her voice sharpened. Odalys, you don't walk into a war unarmed. You call me in the morning. She hung up before I could reply. The rain had stopped, but inside me, the storm had just begun. I didn't sleep that night. I opened every file, every email, everything I'd ever ignored. The cursor blinked in the search bar like it was daring me. Midnight crept past, 1:30, then 2:40. It wasn't just insomnia, it was something heavier, like my mind had decided without my permission that rest wasn't earned until the truth was. Every folder on my drive felt like a crime scene. Innocent enough on the surface, vacation photos, RSVP confirmations, old voicemails. But buried in between were overlooked moments I'd never given second thought to. Now, every harmless gesture felt loaded. The first real crack came at 3:11 a.m., an old PDF titled Engagement Planning Summary, Blaine Trent. I remembered Isolde sending it 6 months ago. Back then, I skimmed it and responded with a heart emoji, but now I read every word, slowly. There it was, on page 5, a clause I'd skipped. In the event of a marriage where the prenuptial agreement is declined or unsigned by the non-Blaine party, said party shall be excluded from any entitlements relating to Blaine holdings, including, but not limited to, estate inclusion, executive board seats, and shareholder gains derived through family trusts. I sat back. That wasn't about protecting Thatcher. That was about fencing me out. Before I even got in, I opened another file. Then another, every document Isolde had forwarded, every dinner invitation that looked warm on the surface but carried a subtle edge. The phrases repeated themselves like a chorus I'd never caught. We've already chosen a caterer. We booked the venue under Blaine Foundation policy. No need to stress about flowers. We've used our family vendor for decades. My name was always in the loop, but never at the center. I was copied in, never asked. Around 5 a.m., my eyes burning, I made a cup of instant coffee. Pacing my small kitchen, I stared out the window as San Antonio began to stir. A trash truck rumbled past. Someone's dog barked twice, then fell silent. The quiet made the thought louder. They never meant for me to be part of their family. They meant for me to orbit around it, polished, silent, grateful. And suddenly I remembered something Reginald Blaine once said to me at a brunch. back when we were still getting to know each other. He'd smiled, cut into his omelet, and said, "We're not the type to make enemies out of complications, we just keep them from touching the estate." I didn't understand it then, but now I knew exactly what he meant. A buzz on my phone snapped me out of it. 6:14 a.m. A message from Malus. Also, "Odalus, check the date on that clause. It was added 6 months before you met him." I blinked. Before? My hand gripped the edge of the counter. I found the metadata. Sure enough, timestamp. April 2nd, 2 years ago. I met Thatcher on October 10th, so they'd drafted that clause, in preparation, before I ever stepped into their orbit, before any real connection, before a first kiss. My stomach twisted, not with heartbreak, but with a strange, acidic clarity. This wasn't some overprotective mother. This wasn't a case of old money being cautious. This was strategy. I was a risk, one they'd seen coming, one they planned for. And Thatcher? He never told me? Not once. The next hour, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I grabbed a yellow legal pad and began to write. A list. Everything I'd ever contributed, financially, legally, emotionally. I pulled receipts, screenshots, even that one time I rewrote the grant application for the Blaine Foundation's biotech wing because their consultant had used ChatGPT and botched the language. They never gave me credit, but I still had the drafts. Another message popped up. Malus again. "You okay?" I typed back, "Getting there. Hi." And then, as the sun came up, casting pale light across my papers and the sticky notes I'd scattered across the kitchen table, the phone rang. Reginald. I stared at his name for a while, then picked up. "Odalus," he said, with the same calm, baritone voice he always used. "Listen, I wanted to clear the air before things become too dramatic." I didn't answer. He continued, "This whole thing with the prenup, it's not about you, it's tradition. Our family's been hurt before. We've had losses, financial and otherwise. This is just protocol." "Is that what I am to you?" I said, my voice flat. "Protocol?" A long pause. "I'm saying it's not personal, dear. You're smart. You get it." I did get it. I got it loud and clear. This wasn't a family. It was a fortress. And I'd been invited into the foyer, but never meant to pass the second door. When the call ended, I placed the phone face down and sat very still. No tears. Just notes. Every name, every clause, every omission. They thought I wouldn't read the fine print. They thought I'd smile pretty and sign away my future, just to sit at their table. But they forgot something. I'd spent my life building my own. And now? They'd taught me exactly how they operate. Thanks to them, I knew exactly where to start. That morning, I drove straight to the courthouse, and not for a wedding license. The air outside still carried the chill of dawn. San Antonio hadn't quite woken up yet. Coffee shops were just unlocking, street cleaners finishing their routes. I pulled into a parking space outside the courthouse, my hands wrapped tight around the steering wheel. My eyes stung from lack of sleep, but inside I was sharper than I'd ever been. My Ellis was already waiting near the front steps, holding 2 travel mugs and an envelope thick enough to suggest she hadn't slept much either. "I pulled the trust filings from the Blaine family," she said without preamble. "You're going to want to sit for this." Inside, the courthouse was mostly quiet. Just a few attorneys milling about, a pair of bailiffs laughing softly near the elevator. We found a bench in a hallway with good light, and Milas opened her laptop. "This clause," she pointed to the screen, tapping it with her pen. "It wasn't just buried in the foundation bylaws. It was submitted 6 months before you ever met Thatcher. Filed by a legal proxy tied to Isolde Blaine." I blinked. "Wait, you're saying—" "They didn't draft it to protect Thatcher. They drafted it for you, Odalus. Before you were even in the picture. This was a preemptive move, a play." My stomach turned. I felt the cold reality click into place, like steel bars sliding shut. I wasn't an accidental target. I had been selected, positioned, handled, and he knew. I didn't need to ask. In that moment, I knew. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to still the ache rising. All those dinners where he said, "My mom's just a bit old-fashioned." All those times he shrugged off my questions about the prenup like they were minor paperwork. And me? I had chalked it up to nerves, to tradition, to being the outsider. I closed my eyes, leaning back against the wooden paneling of the hallway. Did he ever love me? Milas looked away. That silence, tight, respectful, was louder than any answer. We left not long after. There wasn't anything more to uncover, and I had no appetite to play detective anymore. We parted outside. She had a deposition, and I told her I needed a long shower and maybe stronger coffee. But when I got back to my apartment, there was a small package on my doorstep. No return address, no delivery label, just a matte black box with a wax seal I recognized immediately. My father's. My heart stuttered. I stood there for a full minute before I bent down to pick it up. Inside, wrapped in plain manila folders, was a single note in my father's handwriting. "If this reaches you, it means it was time." My hands trembled as I opened the folders. There were official documents, copies of an updated will, notarized letters, and a trust certification processed through a law firm I didn't recognize. The dates were recent, days before he passed away. The letters outlined a transfer of assets, a private account in Wyoming, and ownership of undeveloped family land in the hill country, long assumed to be lost in taxes. The total appraised value? $29 million. I sank to the floor. Not because of the number, not even because of the surprise, but because my father, complicated, rigid, never warm, had left me something real, something lasting. He hadn't said, "I'm proud of you." He hadn't hugged me the last time I saw him. But this was him saying, in his own strange way, "I saw what they didn't." Tears came slowly, quietly, the kind that didn't shake your body, just filled you, like a tide you didn't fight. And somewhere in that silence it became clear, I wasn't marrying into their family. They had been clawing their way into mine. As the sun began to set, I placed the documents in my safe, locked the door behind me, and dialed Malis. She picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" she asked. I smiled softly. "I'm better than okay." Pause. "I need you to ready some papers," I said, "because tomorrow I'm going to the Blaine estate." Another pause. "And this time, I'm bringing my own pen." They welcomed me in with champagne smiles. I raised my glass and smiled right back, but this time I didn't feel like a guest in their home. I walked through the same foyer, now noticing the small chip on the corner of the marble column, the slight unevenness in the pattern of the tile beneath the entry rug. The place no longer felt untouchable. It was just a house. Expensive, yes, imposing, sure, but not sacred. Thatcher approached first. His navy blazer was tailored, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. "You look nice," he said, voice low. I nodded, keeping my coat on just a moment longer. "Thank you. Thanks for having me again." Behind him, Isolde stood in the same silk as last time, but today, her earrings sparkled like they had somewhere to be. "We're so glad you could join us again," she said with practiced sweetness. "I brought something too," I said, setting my leather bag on the sideboard near the dining room. Her brows lifted slightly. How thoughtful. We all moved toward the formal parlor, the one I remembered from the first awkward lunch. Only this time I didn't shrink when Reginald Blaine held out my chair. I took my seat slowly, with purpose. Lunch was artfully plated, roasted duck, some truffle risotto, sliced pears with cheese. All things you'd only serve someone you wanted to impress or distract. Conversation drifted around politics, art auctions, and a cousin's engagement in Charleston. No one mentioned the last time we sat here. No one mentioned the clause, or the file, or the silence. I played along, letting my smile float where it needed to be. I nodded when Reginald remarked how measured I seemed today. "Composure," he said with a grin, "is something we value in this family." Isolde chimed in gently, her eyes holding mine for half a second too long. "You're learning how our family works, Odelis. I must say, it suits you." I set down my fork and reached for my water glass. "Thank you," I said, holding back the words that were waiting their turn. The plates were cleared, champagne was poured. I noticed Isolde watching Thatcher, then me, then Thatcher again. She expected something, but she didn't know what was coming. The butler offered to top off the glasses, but I held up a hand. "Before we toast," I said, pushing back my chair just slightly, "I'd like to say something." Everyone turned. I reached into my leather bag and pulled out a simple navy folder. I set it on the table in front of Thatcher and Isolde. "What's this?" Thatcher asked, glancing down without opening it. "It's my prenup," I said quietly. "A little family tradition. From my side." The room paused. Isolde's fingers froze around her flute. "Excuse me?" I leaned in just enough to keep my tone conversational. "It's pretty straightforward. Joint access to all future income, joint investment control, shared IP rights on any brand, media, or startup ventures we build during the marriage, and," I tapped the corner of the folder, "if it's signed first, it voids any previous clauses, including trust provisions initiated by outside parties." The silence rang like a bell. Reginald cleared his throat sharply. "Is this a joke?" "No," I said, lifting my glass but not drinking. "I just figured, since we're all so fond of contracts, we might as well enjoy matching ones." Thatcher stared at the folder as if it were written in another language. Isolde's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "It's enforceable?" Thatcher finally asked. I looked at him, letting the years of questions I never asked surface just enough in my eyes. "It's signed, dated, witnessed. All we need now is yours." "But," Isolde cut in, her voice tight, "why now?" I tilted my head gently. "Because I've been told, more than once, that I should know what I'm walking into. And I do. I just thought maybe you should too." "You can't seriously expect him to sign this," Reginald muttered. "Oh, but I do," I said, setting my champagne down. "And you'll need to sign today, or the engagement is off." Thatcher pushed his chair back, almost knocking into the edge of the table. "You're bluffing." I reached into my purse again, slowly, and placed my father's gold pen beside the folder, the one he used for every final contract, the one I hadn't touched in 5 months. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The pen gleamed under the chandelier's light, like it had waited years for this moment. But I didn't move. I didn't need to. Just setting it on the table was enough. Reginald cleared his throat, his eyes darting between me and Thatcher like he was calculating the cost of every second that passed. "I think we should consult legal," he said finally, turning slightly to the hallway behind him. A moment later, one of their in-house attorneys appeared. I recognized him. Franklin Mayer. Wore too much cologne, always addressed me as Miss, even after the engagement was announced. Franklin's lips tightened as he stepped into the parlor. "What's going on?" "She wants a prenup," Reginald said. Thatcher scoffed. "No, she's demanding I sign her prenup." I didn't rise to the bait. "Just a small tradition from my side," I replied, eyes on Franklin. "And before you ask, yes, it's been notarized, reviewed, and it supersedes any prior draft not mutually signed." Franklin looked to Reginald, waiting for direction, but Reginald didn't speak. Isolde did. "This is absurd," she snapped. "You can't just show up and expect us to toss aside decades of planning because you had a good lawyer and a dramatic moment." I smiled. "Actually, I can." She opened her mouth again, but I reached into my bag, not rushed, not aggressive, and pulled out a second envelope. Cream-colored, thicker, wax seal, my father's crest still intact. I slid it to Franklin. "This was included in my father's estate documents, dated 8 months before the engagement. You'll find a notarized statement confirming my status as sole heir to all intellectual property under the Fay Trust, including the residual royalties from Blue Silo Holdings. Also..." I paused for effect as Franklin opened the envelope and skimmed. "A clause. If I enter into a union with another legacy family, the Fay holdings remain protected unless the other party agrees to full asset transparency. Otherwise, the merger is null. That includes media access, trademarks, and the name. Isolde paled. I turned to her, softening my voice. That includes your lifestyle magazine, by the way, the one you're trying to relaunch using my name in the promotional campaign. She blinked rapidly but didn't argue. Franklin unfolded a smaller piece of paper, aged at the corners. He cleared his throat, hesitated, then read, "If they ever try to reduce you, remind them what bloodline they're marrying into." I recognized the script, my father's handwriting. He'd always said less with more. Thatcher sat frozen, mouth slightly ajar, like he couldn't decide whether to yell or disappear. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "This isn't fair." I turned to him, measured. "Neither was asking me to walk into your house, into your family with open arms, only to be handed a document meant to strip me bare, all while smiling, while you stayed silent." He dropped his gaze. Reginald sighed. Loud. "Thatcher. Sign the damn paper." Isolde jolted like someone had slapped her. "Reginald, you can't be serious." "I'm very serious," he snapped. "You wanted a Blaine alliance. Well, here it is, but not on your terms anymore." Thatcher stared at the pen like it might bite him. Then, with an almost imperceptible tremble in his fingers, he picked it up, clicked it, and signed. I said nothing. Just nodded once, then gently took the folder, folded it, and placed it back in my bag. I stood. "Thank you for your time." No applause, no words, just the sound of leather against fabric as I pulled my coat over my shoulders and walked toward the door. Franklin opened it for me, oddly respectful now. Maybe he saw something they didn't. The wind outside bit at my cheeks. Late autumn, sharp and honest. My car was parked at the bottom of the estate's drive, past the fountain Thatcher once joked about renovating in my name. I reached it in measured steps, not hurried. I wasn't running. I wasn't escaping. Inside the car, I closed the door gently behind me. The silence was a comfort I hadn't known I missed. I rested both hands on the steering wheel and just sat there. Then it came. Not loud sobs, not the unraveling kind of grief, just quiet tears, warm, steady, human. Not everything broken deserves fixing, but sometimes it deserves being seen. And I had been seen, finally. Not for their convenience, not for what I could offer, but for the weight of who I was, on my own. I reached for my phone, 2 missed calls from Melis, and 1 voicemail. I pressed play. Her voice was low, breathless. "Are you sitting down? You're going to want to hear what Lucy just leaked." I pulled the car door closed gently, sat back in my seat, and let the quiet take over. For a few long seconds, the only sound was the soft purr of the engine. My hands were still on the steering wheel, but they weren't gripping anymore. The Blaine estate gate loomed behind me in the rearview mirror. It felt far away, like something I'd already left behind emotionally, even though I hadn't moved an inch. Then came the vibration. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. 1 new voicemail. From Melis. I tapped play. "Odellis, it's Melis. Are you sitting down? You're going to want to hear what Lucy just leaked." I put the call on speaker and let it play again, this time without the haze of shock clouding my ears. Lucy, the young assistant from Blaine PR, barely out of college. Quiet, always tucked behind a laptop in meetings. I remembered her eyes. Wide, watching more than speaking. Melis's voice continued. She leaked the internal proposal, the one they presented to their board 6 months ago. Subject line reads, "Marital merger strategy, Q4 positioning," and "Odellis, your photo's on slide 3. My breath hitched. Then I exhaled, slowly, deliberately, like setting down a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. I didn't cry, didn't throw the phone across the dash like someone in a movie would. Instead, I just whispered to no one. Of course they did. Still in the car, I opened the file Melis had sent over. My thumb scrolled as my eyes scanned, slide after slide, charts, projected brand improvement metrics, press release drafts, and there, bold and centered, utilize strategic engagement with Odellis Fay, PhD candidate, Underdog narrative, strong minority optics, positioning for media redemption arc. They had written me like a marketing plan. I wasn't even a fiancé. I was a tool, a diversity angle, a photo op, a rebrand. I let my head fall back against the seat. The car ceiling looked the same as it always had, but suddenly it felt too small, like even the air had been in on the game. I laughed, just once, short, sharp. It bounced off the windshield and vanished. They thought I was a narrative, I said aloud, my voice steady. I'm a chapter they don't get to write. It took me a while to start the car. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20. I don't know. But eventually, I drove, not home, not yet, but to the small cafe Malis mentioned Lucy liked. Tucked between a dry cleaner and a florist, the place smelled like warm croissants and espresso grounds. It was the kind of place people forget exists, until they need somewhere private to break. Lucy was already seated at the back table, arms wrapped tightly around her tablet, like she expected someone to come snatch it. She looked up and offered a weak smile. "Hi, Dr. Faye." I sat down across from her and shook my head gently. "Odalys is fine. You didn't have to risk your job for me." Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. They used your picture in 6 different campaign drafts. One even had a mock-up of a Vogue feature. Modern love meets legacy wealth. She pushed the tablet forward. The emails came next. Dozens of them. Internal strings from Thatcher's uncle, PR heads, even Isolde chiming in with comments like, "Her backstory will play beautifully in the Times piece. Thatcher's hesitation is emotional, not strategic." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Hesitation, not love, not doubt, just strategy. Lucy's voice broke the silence. "He cried when he found out about your inheritance," she said softly. "Told his father, now we can finally be equals." That was the only time I ever heard him say anything remotely genuine. I nodded. Once, then reached into my purse for my phone. "Thank you, Lucy," I said, and meant it. This was more than a leak. It was clarity. She looked down. "They're going to blame you." I smiled gently. "Let them." I stepped outside and called Malis. "Let's set up the foundation account today," I said, walking toward my car. "And remove Blaine Estate from all active partnership listings. I don't want their name anywhere near mine." Malis didn't ask questions, just responded, "Already done," and Odalys, "Proud of you." That evening, back in my apartment, I poured myself a cup of tea I didn't really want and sat by the window. The city lights blinked in the distance, calm and indifferent. I logged into the event portal, our wedding site. At the top was a banner. "Event cancelled. Due to recent privacy concerns and third-party interference, the Blaine family regrets to announce the indefinite postponement of the Blaine-Faye wedding." Beneath it, a message from Isolde, sanitized and vague, implying I'd breached confidentiality. I didn't flinch. I clicked the reply button and quietly uploaded a zip file. 27 pages of internal emails, drafts, pitch decks, and the cover slide with my face stamped beneath the words, "Asset Repositioning Strategy, Q4. Then I closed my laptop. No message, no caption, just the truth. I didn't rush. After uploading the last file, I sat back in my chair, let the silence stretch across my apartment, and watched the spinning icon blink, then vanish. The entire packet, all 27 pages of carefully worded manipulation, had been sent, not just to the legal watchdog group, but to 3 journalists I trusted, one from The Atlantic, one from the Washington Ledger, and the third, an old professor-turned-columnist who'd once warned me about families like the Blaines. Then, with both hands steady, I typed a public statement and pressed publish. I have nothing to gain, but others deserve to know when families play God with reputations and love. No hashtags, no drama, just clarity. It took 23 minutes before I saw the first alert, then 6 more, then hundreds. The emails had gone viral. By the time I refreshed the page, your Blaine documents had started trending on X. A TikTok clip showed a young woman summarizing the proposal deck in front of a whiteboard like a college lecture. She'd circled the words, marital merger strategy, and underlined my photo, asking her viewers, would you marry someone who called you a diversity asset? It wasn't just shock, it was outrage. And it wasn't just about me anymore. My phone buzzed constantly. Former colleagues I hadn't heard from in years messaged to say, I'm sorry. One even admitted, I used to think you were overreacting. I didn't know. Of course, the Blaine estate wasn't silent for long. Thatcher released a statement via video that evening. He wore a crisp navy blazer, no tie, standing before the fireplace in his family's Hamptons home. His voice had that soft, measured tone his mother coached into him, carefully rehearsed. I never meant to hurt anyone. I believed in love, and I still do. This situation, it's complicated. I ask for privacy as our families navigate this difficult moment. He didn't mention me once, not by name. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because the next wave hit by midnight. Sponsors started pulling their money from the Blaine Foundation. A children's cancer initiative distanced itself with a firm press release. One of the major fashion brands pulled out of a long-standing collaboration with Isolde. By morning, she'd stepped down from her board roles, publicly citing health concerns. And one of the state senators who'd appeared on the PR pitch deck, he opened a preliminary investigation into undisclosed lobbying via personal relationships. They hadn't just played God with my life. They tried to play politics with mine, too. That afternoon, I stayed in the office. Melis brought over a sandwich and a hot tea. She didn't say much, just lit 2 votive candles near the window and sat across from me. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. I watched the soft flicker of candlelight against the marble windowsill and finally let my shoulders drop. I looked up at her and said quietly, "It's not revenge. It's exposure. Truth isn't cruel. It's just overdue." She reached out, squeezed my hand once, and nodded. It was just after 8:30 p.m. when I sat down at my desk again. I opened the folder labeled Wedding, guest lists, mood boards, the registry, drafts of vows. I didn't scroll through them. I just right-clicked the folder, delete. The screen asked, "Are you sure?" I clicked yes. Then, almost like muscle memory, I checked one last time. There was a message from Thatcher, sent hours earlier. The subject line was blank. Inside were just 5 words. "Did you ever love me?" I stared at it. Not because I didn't know the answer. I did. But because it made me realize he still thought this was about him. I clicked block. And just like that, the connection ended. I shut down my screen, picked up my tea, and leaned back. I was halfway through a second sip when my laptop pinged again. One new message, this one from an unfamiliar sender, a small firm based in Washington, D.C. Subject line, "We'd like to fund your foundation, fully. When can we talk?" I didn't just walk away with the truth. I walked into something bigger. The inbox pinged just after dawn. I hadn't slept much the night before. Too many emotions running quiet under the surface. Not adrenaline, not revenge, just weightlifting. The kind that doesn't make a sound when it leaves you, but suddenly your lungs remember what breathing should feel like. The email's subject line blinked on my screen. "We'd like to fund your foundation, fully. When can we talk?" The sender, a firm in D.C. I'd heard of them, old money, conservative on paper, but lately they'd been backing women's advocacy projects, quietly but decisively. This wasn't some vague offer, it was a door, and this time I had the key. 3 weeks later, I stood at the steps of a stately brick building just 3 blocks from the Capitol, the kind of place with frosted windows, polished railings, and a plaque that read more like legacy than business. The elevator up smelled like new leather and purpose. They offered full backing, office space, staff, budget, press support, but only if I agreed to be the face of the foundation. I gave them one sentence, one condition. No more branding women as broken or brave. We don't perform our pain. We fund their voices. We don't speak over them. We stand beside them. Silence, then nods. And that was how the Marin Initiative began. Named after the woman who'd raised me when the rest of the world found me inconvenient. My grandmother Marin used to press wildflower seeds into my palm and say, "You don't need to shout to change a place, just bloom where they never expected you to." Now, her name was etched into the glass of our entrance wall. The first campaign, my own story. We called it The Cost of a Signature, a digital docu-series tracing how family contracts, financial, emotional, reputational, shackle women into palatable silence. I didn't flinch. Not when the first article ran, not when the first billboard went up across from a Blaine-owned event hall in Atlanta, not when my photo appeared in the New York Times beneath the headline, "The Woman Who Refused to Be Bought," and bought back her voice. I didn't respond when Reginald Blaine issued his carefully spun apology on national radio. "We deeply regret the private misjudgments that became public," he said. His voice had that calm banker tone, like a man offering discounts after a PR storm, not remorse. Isolde resigned from all her board seats, cited medical stress. Thatcher vanished. No press, no tweets, no statements. Just silence. The same kind he once used like a blade. I didn't chase any of it. Truth had legs now. It didn't need mine. One evening, the office was empty. The cleaning crew had gone. My heels clicked softly on the polished wood as I crossed into my corner room. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Capitol, bathed in dusk light. I poured myself a small glass of red wine, let the quiet stretch. Then I opened the bottom drawer of the cabinet behind my desk, pulled out a thin leather folder. The original prenup. My name typed in capital letters, clause after clause spelling out how love had been reduced to conditions, to exit strategies, to someone's fear of my independence. I opened another drawer. Inside was a metal tag labeled Closed Lessons. I slipped the folder in, shut the drawer, and locked it. Across the room, my computer chimed. A message. From him, Thatcher. 5 words. "Did you ever love me?" I stared at it, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger, no nostalgia, no ache. Just a clean, sharp awareness that I had already answered that question, with every step I'd taken away from him. I hit block. Then I opened my journal and wrote something different. A letter to the girl I used to be. You weren't difficult. You were deliberate. You weren't too much. You were just ahead. They tried to cage your power because they saw it before you did, but you found it anyway. Later that night, I kicked off my shoes in the doorway of my new apartment. Sparse, warm, mine. I curled onto the sofa with my wine in hand and the city lights in the distance. No voices, no expectations, no papers to sign, only peace. Some people hand you contracts to control your worth. But real value? It doesn't come with signatures or conditions. It comes the moment you stop asking for permission and start writing your own terms. Do you think I was too cold or just finally awake?